All right, all right. Let me remove this backdrop here. We are live, and we are going to dive into the Metanomics. So, if you guys didn't catch, let me share the screen here. If you guys didn't catch the stream yesterday, I recommend after watching this stream to go back and look at the overview from the team themselves talking about the vision. I think that they laid it out pretty well. Not pretty well. I think they nailed it. They covered essentially every topic that you could think of and articulated why this new model is set to transform everything and really setting up this network for mass adoption. And so the other thing I wanted to point out today was, we didn't take this decision, we at Stardust, lightly of the changes. And one of the things that we requested before we approved the transfer of funds from our treasury to the team is we wanted to review the tokenomics itself and how the team was actually planning on handling all this stuff. And so we reviewed the tokenomics and we actually liked it. We agreed with everything that was in there. And today we're actually going to cover all this. But one of the things that we at Stardust wanted to do is we felt that it was important to have an independent authority actually review the tokenomics itself. Because, it's one thing if we're saying it's great, and it's yet another to have a third party review your work and see if they agree with it. And for those who don't know, Hacken is a leading industry company. They review everything. They have done thousands of audits, and they have audited everything from Polkadot, Avalanche, all the top chains, Binance. And they actually gave Constellation a really good rating. And we're actually, Chris and I are going to walk through this report and explain in detail, why we agree with this assessment. And I encouraged everybody yesterday to actually read this report. This is actually a really good report, and they gave us an incredible rating. They actually liked the tokenomics, and they agreed with everything in it. There wasn't anything bad in this tokenomics. And so today, Chris and I are going to kind of walk through and explain the benefits in greater detail for those who kind of might have just gone over people's heads about the importance and how this new mechanism is actually going to translate into adoption and into growth. But more importantly, how you as a token holder are actually going to benefit from this new system.
Yeah, and maybe, Dagno, if I could just jump in briefly, two things I'd want to point out. The goal of Stardust is to represent the Constellation community. So Constellation, the entity, kind of worked their butts off, came up with this model that they believed, was the best move for the platform to grow in a sustainable way, kind of in a resilient way, regardless of what we see in the crypto marketplace, whether it's bear markets, bull markets, the ability for Constellation to attract the best developers, to build on the platform, and ultimately create a thriving ecosystem. Stardust kind of takes a look at that, and we kind of act on the benefit of individual token holders or community members. How does this impact, your average DAG holder, right? And so that's really the puts and takes. It's not that there's necessarily opposing forces, but that's kind of like the check and balance of the system. And so, as Dagnum kind of mentioned, one of the initiatives of Stardust was, look, we like this. We had some pushbacks on certain items. There, as Dagnum said, there was a lot of back and forth, not to try to, tilt the scales one way or the other for the community versus the entity, but more to make sure everything, was in the best interest of Constellation ecosystem. And part of that was, getting this third party in Hacken to take a look at it, because as DAG holders or as Constellation members, we're all pretty close to kind of what's going on. And sometimes getting a reputable third party, right, who doesn't have a vested interest in the ecosystem can, be a little bit more objective about, hey, does the math check out? Is this something that is sustainable? And so that's really why you go to somebody like a Hacken, is to kind of get that objective third party kind of assessment of the sustainability of the tokenomics for the long term, and does it create a situation where ecosystem should be able to thrive. And so I just wanted to add that context of why this was done, and kind of how that give and take relationship is between kind of Stardust and Constellation. And I'm really happy with the outcome in the metanomics we ended up with.
Yeah, and you can see even from them. So again, like, this is like a leading industry reputable company. They have their whole reputation on hand. So if this was a crap model, they would say it's a crap model. And if you read the report, I mean, even in the report, so this is on the 7th page, it even highlights that the current model relies on a finite pool, essentially, and it's set to be depleted by 2025 and 2026, right? So, it was important moving forward for the whole growth of the entire ecosystem and for token holders that something needed to change. I mean, there was no way that the network was going to be set up for mass adoption when you had a reward system that was going to be depleted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key, is understanding. I think there has been some of the pushback we've kind of heard in the community, on things like Twitter or in Telegram. And I think it's important to listen to feedback, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, or if you think that you're able to kind of refute that with facts. It's always important to understand, how people are thinking about things. And I think if you step back and think about the 10,000 foot level, and this was so apparent, with the stream Constellation did the other day, that this is all about growing the network. And there was a situation here where there wasn't enough capital, there wasn't a sustainable system to really foster the growth in the network that this technological platform warrants, right? And so this is about, how do you grow the number of metagraphs? How do you grow snapshots through time in a way that's, equitable for DAG holders? It's equitable for the ecosystem, right? You want it to be attractive for people that want to run metagraphs. You want it to be attractive for DAG holders, and you want the value of the ecosystem to grow. And we were kind of in this spot where, it wasn't optimal, and it wasn't a sustainable solution to kind of get to where this ecosystem needs to get, which is a ton of metagraphs, competition to be able to run metagraphs, excitement on the ecosystem and the projects that are coming, right?
Oh, yeah, hold on. All right. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to highlight some of the stuff that that maybe people missed, because it's important, right? So yesterday, Diggles was actually dropping some alpha here, And this is a direct quote from the stream yesterday. So before he actually jumped on that thing with Ginfinity where they were talking about the Metanomics, he was just got out of a meeting with Panasonic and, quote, being able to integrate Web3 with existing Web2 without having to rebuild their whole platform. So like that was huge, right? So, essentially we don't really have an idea, we'll find out at some point what exactly Panasonic is doing. They have a whole suite of products. They've got home IoT stuff. This is on Panasonic's website. Not only do they have home IoT stuff, but they're actually an industry leader in IoT solutions. They've got tons of stuff, sensors, manufacturing equipment, and any one of these things could be integrated as a sensor on the network right now, because you can take your existing hardware and you can plug that in directly to the Metagraph or any Metagraph. So it could be any one of these solutions, any one of these sensors, any one of these applications, any one of these Panasonic products could be it, or it could be actually multiple of these products. It could be TVs. Panasonic makes a lot of TVs. They make cameras, and it could be something super simple. But when you take a company like Panasonic, and it's a global company, and you think about how many products they have, the number here gets pretty mind-blowing. And I'm going to show you guys here an example that already exists. So the door Metagraph. The door Metagraph is a simple IoT device. It just plugs up on any doorway and it collects foot traffic. And that foot traffic is then bundled up in snapshots, and then it's submitted to the global hypergraph. And the hypergraph takes check-ins of these devices. So currently, there's 3,000 of these nodes, these door DTMs. And if you do the math, if you look at the snapshots that are submitted every single day, I counted it out myself. I looked at the snapshot count from yesterday to today, and it roughly translates into around 20,000 snapshots a day. Okay, and that's just from these DTMs. That's just from 3,000 DTMs. And so how that is going to translate into snapshot fees, which everybody is really excited about, is so the snapshot limit, the freemium limit here is 50 kilobytes. So if you take 50 kilobytes and you do 20,000 snapshots a day, it roughly comes out to about 600,000 snapshots a month. And now this is for the DTM, right? So that comes out to a monthly cost here of did I have the stake? Yeah, it's 0 staked DAG, right? So that comes out to a total cost of $400, which isn't a lot of money, right? That's 3,000 devices, and it costs the company $400 a month to operate. But here's where the delegators come in, and here's where the staking stuff comes in. So this is with zero stake DAG. So imagine you have, we'll just put out a number, just an easy number, like 10 million DAG, which is totally reasonable. There's plenty of holders that have this amount of DAG. So I don't think that that's an unreasonable estimate to say that there could potentially be 10 million stake DAG on the door Metagraph. And, that reduced the cost to actually, it changes it, right? So you don't even have a reduction of cost, you have a net benefit. So Door, all of a sudden, instead of costing money, they're making money. Okay, but that's just Door. So with Panasonic, for example, you have an industry leader, global IoT manufacturer. They've, like I said, they've got millions of TVs out on the open market. They've got millions of cameras out on the open market. They've probably got tens of millions of these sensors integrated everywhere for businesses or even factories. So I don't think it's unreasonable to have an estimate of something like 50,000. So when I did the math, 50,000 sensors would roughly translate into, I did the math, and it was 500,000 snapshots a day. So 500,000 snapshots a day translates into 15 million snapshots a month. So what does that look like? So we'll remove the staked DAG here. So this is, again, no staked DAG, no delegators. So that would cost Panasonic $18,000 a month. Okay. $18,000 a month. And, you know, Panasonic's a big company. I'm sure that they have the money to cover it, but let's put in some delegators here. Let's put in some stake DAG. Let's do that 10 million, for example, which is a beyond reasonable estimate. And that takes it down to $5,000 a month. But you know, this is Panasonic. This is a global company. You're going to have way more than 10 million DAG staked. You know, you're probably going to have. So when we had, if you guys remember, we had the soft node staking, and at one point we had like 50% of the supply staked, I think. So I don't even think it's unreasonable to assume, you know, something like, I don't know, we'll just say like 500 million, right? I mean, I think that that's a pretty reasonable estimate. All the DAG in circulation, all the holders are probably going to want to stake on Panasonic. And so, boom, all of a sudden, Panasonic goes from a cost to a net benefit. They're actually making money off of this.
Yeah, can I cut in right there? I've got a lot I want to talk about what you just said, and this is really interesting point. So this is a public network that they can effectively get paid to use, right? They're not owning the servers. They're using the infrastructure, not even for free. They're making money. And that's a really compelling kind of opportunity when you start to think about what that can mean for the attractiveness of the public DAG network for enterprise, right? And then if you want to scroll to the top, Dagnum, or actually even just go back to the Panasonic page, if you don't mind, let's just kind of talk about some other projects in the space that maybe I'm a little familiar with. But, you know, the numbers we're using here in terms of number of snapshots is incredibly conservative. None of us really know what Diggles is alluding to and what the size of that is, but it's probably better to assume, you know, a conservative one IoT vertical, you know, maybe it's, you know, a few million devices, but something you kind of have to understand. And I'll give you two examples of how this works in the industry. If Panasonic does this, and they're able to do this for a cost that for them is effectively de minimis, right? Or even potentially make a little bit of money doing this, depending upon how many delegators stake to them, that's going to probably get out within Panasonic. In some meetings, people are going to be like, oh, that Constellation project, you know, you guys were doing that kind of trial where we did a small segment of our business. How's that going? Oh, it's going great. You know, everything's secure. We thought it was going to cost us a few $1,000s a month or 20 grand a month. It turns out it's basically free. And then what's likely to happen is other departments, other IoT verticals probably take a look at this, and the growth just even within one partner could be enormous, right? And so you got to kind of think about that. We see this happening in other ecosystems. I'll start with Alchemy. Look at Alchemy. If you're not familiar, right? Amazon Web Services did ads with Alchemy. They started with a small amount in one quarter. They saved a ton of money doing it. They said, you know what, we're going to double that amount. For Amazon, it's like a rounding error. For Alchemy, it's a big jump in revenue. Well, then the next quarter, they said, you know what, this is going really well. Let's triple it. And that's what happens when you work with these massive entities. And it's not just Alchemy. Look at someone like Quant, and this is maybe less quantifiable because of the, let's say, more of a closed ecosystem or black box nature of what they do. But Alchemy does a trial, right, with one central bank, the Bank of England. Then you're hearing about other central banks trialing, their solutions for interoperability. That's how these things work. When people see that it's working, they talk to each other, right? Central banks talk to each other. Divisions within Panasonic talk to each other. And then national DigiFoundry members talk to each other. And so that's really the compounding power here of this platform being very attractive for enterprises. And if I could just make one more point, let's just talk Door Metagraph here. If we get enough people delegating to the Door Metagraph, their snapshot cost goes from, I think it was $400 a month he showed, to they're probably making, $1,000 a month. What's Door going to do with that net profit? They're probably going to distribute it amongst door holders or burn Door tokens. So there's a lot of power here on how, one, it's super attractive to the large, massive players that can easily stake, 500 million DAG by market buying it themselves. But it's also, and this is the beauty of the Delegator platform, and this kind of addresses one criticism, this just helps the big guys. Well, no, actually, because the community has the ability to delegate to whatever projects they see fit, right? Mm-hmm. Without asking Constellation, without asking permission, you just delegate your tokens to whatever metagraph you want. You can take something like Door from a net cost for snapshots to massive profit every month by delegating to Door, right? And so that allows these smaller metagraphs that aren't the size of huge enterprises that DAG's trying to attract to be able to drastically change their economics very early on in the life of their metagraph. And that is a really powerful phenomenon. And I hope the community understands that the delegation actually, just from a metagraph standpoint, I'm also going to talk a lot about what it means for individual DAG holders and why it's so attractive, but it levels the playing field dramatically where not just the people with deep pockets, can get the best economics, but the savvy DAG community can find these metagraphs that are the best opportunity, the best idea, and delegate to them, allowing that best idea to ramp up much faster because you can mitigate or even remove cost altogether from them creating snapshots. And so what a compelling, mechanism for the best ideas in the community to be able to grow massively without cost burden.
Right. And so, before we get into the modeling, I kind of want to hammer in essentially what you just said. Looking at Panasonic, that's a huge win for the network. But essentially what's happening is Panasonic is going to attract delegators. It's going to funnel validator fees to pay fees and stake snapshots at a discount, right? Essentially locking up and removing incentives from circulation, right? So the critics would be like, oh, well, that means that Panasonic is not burning so much DAG anymore. No. Panasonic would be generating so much activity and removing so much DAG out of circulation that the net benefit is still way bigger than burning snapshot fees, right? So snapshot fees are not strangling the business, any business or projects out there?
Hey, can I chime in? Like I've always like said in the past that what kind of attracted me to Constellation Network over any other crypto was the fact that they don't do gas fees, right? All of us are kind of like, we got excited about that, and that's an amazing thing. Instead, they thought of it the right way to where crypto can be in the real world, right? So instead of charging the users that use the network, they charge on the back end, which is great for businesses because they can calculate their how much money do they need to come in to be able to sustain something. They don't have this exorbitant gas fee that goes up and down. You know what I mean? So like if they get tons of customers coming in, all of a sudden now they're paying a huge gas fee. So it kind of defeats the whole purpose of doing things, right? So that's one of the things that I thought was really great coming into Constellation Network. The cool thing also that I see with this delegating stuff is, back in the day, I had software that I gave away for free. I had software that was subscription based, things like that. What I think is really cool with this is this kind of opens the door for companies to be able to do things like offering a subscription based software, offering a freemium software, but that freemium software can actually make users money. You know what I mean? It's like if they have this crypto involved with it, they can delegate to that company. They can make money off of that company, right? With a free program that they're using. That company still has a pay version of their program that does something more, that brings in more revenue to that software, right? And at the same time, they're getting this network that's basically paying for itself because users like us are delegating to it, right? So like it's kind of it's a win-win situation for everybody that's involved. Everybody can be a part of it and get a piece of that pie, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the benefit of the horizontal scalability, right? Is your cost is not impacted by overall network activity. It's impacted by your activity, which is the way it needs to be for a business. And, the flexibility to pay in dollars or DAG is also really important, right? If you're holding 100 million DAG as Panasonic, hypothetically, maybe you want to pay in DAG. Like if DAG goes up, that's fine. If it goes down, you have enough. But if you're a business that doesn't really have the funding to sit there and market by 100 million DAG, and you haven't attracted a lot of delegators yet, you have a predictable cost in dollars. So you're not freaking about your budget month to month, which is something that would happen if you tried to do this on a network such as Ethereum, right? Where you're paying in a token, that token price can be volatile. And oh, by the way, if the network activity as a whole goes up, which is completely out of your control as a business, your cost, not only are you impacted by the token price, but you're impacted by network activity. As we all know, gas fees increase when Ethereum is more bogged down or has higher network activity. One thing I want to point out, Dagnum, is there's two mechanisms here that I think we need to distinguish, and it's important. What you are showing on that calculator is someone buying DAG and staking it and effectively holding it in a wallet, which is actually separate. That's an existing mechanism that is still here in Metanomics, but it is something that came before. Metanomics on top of that introduces delegation, right? So that's really where delegation balances the playing field. If Panasonic wants to market buy enough DAG so that their fees are effectively zero, they can do that, and then it just sits there. But on top of that, people could delegate on top of their metagraph, and at that point, their snapshot fees aren't getting reduced. They're just getting a portion of the inflationary rewards of delegators, right? That they clip that 5 to 10% fee. And so they could be making money that way. And so those are actually two separate things that we need to talk about. if you're a small, operation, like I'll use Door just because it's an existing metagraph. Maybe Door is not going to market buy 1 million DAG and sit on it, in their metagraph, but they could have 100 million DAG from Delegators. And the important distinction is when you have Delegators, your snapshot fees aren't reduced the way they are if you're holding that DAG yourself. With the Delegators, you're still paying the snapshot fee, but your fee scrape from the rewards is enough to offset it. And so the important distinction there is that the DAG is burned. And I think that's really important for people to understand. If somebody's just holding 100 million DAG in their kind of wallet for their metagraph, that's a fee reduction. But the Delegators aren't reducing fees. You're using the rewards to compensate you back for fees you have to pay. So the burns still take place, right? It's effectively delegation is delegating where those rewards go within the ecosystem. And so I hope that makes sense to people. It's a pretty big distinction for how I think about things. I think you might be on mute, Dagnum. I can't hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So this I adjusted the calculator. Yeah, and if I didn't point that out in the beginning, it's important to note that this is just staking. This doesn't even include the net benefits of delegation, which is a compounding thing that you can do on top of just staking DAG. And so I adjusted the calculator, and this is the Door. So 20,000 snapshots a day comes out to roughly 600,000 a month. And so the total snapshot cost for Door right now, or anybody like a small outfit that wants to do something similar to Door, it would cost them essentially $400 a month to operate their metagraph and submit snapshots.
Yeah, and like ultimately, at any point in time, there's only so much DAG token available to anyone, right? So if Panasonic, being an early mover here, can hoard enough DAG, so to speak, buy enough DAG and stake it in their metagraph, maybe they get to do it for free. But not everyone's going to be able to come out and buy 100 million or 500 million DAG with their new idea. And so what that means is people are going to either have to increase the demand for DAG so that they can secure that for their own metagraph, or they're going to have to rely on Delegators. So it's something important to understand, because what I'm really trying to tell you is not everyone's going to be able to reduce their snapshot cost, right? It's not possible in the network. There's only so much DAG, right? And so you have to kind of rely on those Delegator rewards. Ultimately, once enough DAG is locked up by different metagraphs, the rest is owned by the community, right? And so that means you're going to have to attract the Delegators to try to offset some of your costs. And the important thing to understand here is if people are already delegating, them delegating to you versus someone else doesn't change the inflationary rate or the amount of reward increase. It's just determining where it goes in the network.
That's exactly right. And, again, all of this is covered in the Hacken review. Like this page here, I mean, this is all covered in the Hacken review. All of the models, all of the modeling simulation, which we're going to get to here in a second. This was all done by the Hacken review. And again, it got like one of the highest ratings that they offer. So yeah, I mean,
and I think it's important to mention, I think the way Hacken looks at it is it an equitable outcome for holders, but also is it sustainable, right? And that's the most important important thing is it's a transition to a more sustainable model that really gives the tools needed by both the community and the Constellation team to attract the best businesses, the best metagraphs possible, right? And grow the ecosystem for all. And maybe this is a good point for me to kind of harp on something that I've been talking about the moment I got a chance to really kind of go through these metanomic changes. I think it's really important for people to step back. And you see this a lot in crypto, for example. Oh, I want to own 5,000, Tau, or I want to own, 5 whole Bitcoin, or I want to own 1 million DAG or 10 million DAG. I think the Constellation community needs to step back and understand that with a supply that can stretch higher and eventually come back down, it's better to think about your holdings not as a specific number, since supply is no longer permanently fixed. It's best to actually think about it as you have a percentage ownership in the network. And so why is that important? Like, why do I think people should think about it that way? If you own a certain percentage of the Constellation network by holding DAG, and this model is completely geared towards growing the value of that network, right? What's important then for you as the DAG holder is, with these metanomics, even if the supply is going up temporarily before it peaks and then likely comes back down from burns or from, let's say, snapshot fees, what happens to my percent ownership? And what you'll find if you look at the numbers is in all scenarios, whether it's metagraph growth disappoints us, metagraph growth is tremendous, bull market, bear market, these all have impacts on kind of how that inflationary rate works. If you dig into the metanomics, token price going up actually reduces the inflation rate. So that's why price matters. Token price going down increases the inflation rate. And obviously that's all temporary and resets. But the point being, as a DAG holder, as long as you're delegating, you are getting a lion's share of the rewards. So what does that mean? Well, if you're getting more of the inflation than other areas of the network, your share of the network is going up. So that's the important thing to think about. Your piece of the pie is actually growing. And if you're a validator who attracts a ton of delegators, you can even outpace your average delegator. So it's good for validators. It puts them in competition with each other. It's good for delegators, which is anyone who holds DAG, right? You're no longer just waiting to become a validator or on testnet or this or that. You can actively participate if you're in the waiting queue, and you can actually grow your share of the pie. Maybe you don't have enough, for a validator node. Well, by using the delegator mechanism, you can compound your returns to get there. And in the meantime, you can own which metagraphs you're delegating to. There might be some outperformance. Maybe you delegate to a metagraph that gives you a few of their tokens, and those perform, really, really well. So that's on the individual, right, to decide where to delegate. But I really want to hammer this point home, and I think this is something that was lost in some of the critiques or pushbacks we saw. Don't focus on the overall number, focus on your slice of the pie, and understand that the whole goal of all of this is to grow the value of that pie. So if Metanomics is successful, and the reason we're excited is we believe it's going to grow the value of the pie, and your slice of the pie grows, that's a win-win. And so I think that's why a lot of us are so excited.
Yeah, maybe this would be a good time to show the modeling.
Yeah. I'm not gonna. So I'll go ahead and present now if I can.
Yeah.
I'll just do my home screen here. Okay.
I got to drop, guys. I'm sorry. But you
right.
guys are doing great. So I'll catch the video later.
So of course, Dagnum, even though this worked yesterday, now again, now it's not working, right? Could you potentially pull this up? Here, let me see if, gosh, I don't know why this worked no problem last night and now suddenly it's a problem. Okay, so this looks like the Metanomics document, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is the review.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull it up while you're trying to pull it up. The wow, wow, wow.
All right, let's see. All right, can you, I think I might have got it finally.
Okay.
Or can you
Oh,
unshare?
yeah. Yeah, there it is.
Whoa.
Oh, you're
All right, so let's do
sharing
that.
your.
Is that better? Is that better?
There it is. There it is.
Oh, okay. So sorry about that technical difficulties, guys. Look, this is a really cool tool, and there's so much here. I just want to, rather than like telling people what numbers they should put in, I kind of want to walk people through what different things you can tweak for different scenarios. So you want to start in the year 2025, right? Because that's when Metanomics are going to kick in, like Q1 2025. You can do this simulation for as many years as you want. There's kind of preset scenarios with conservative growth, stable growth, and thriving growth, right? You can start with the initial DAG price. Then they've incorporated kind of crypto bull and bear markets, and you can set that to be a bull market is 4 years, 5 years, however you want to do it. You can set the minimum token price, the maximum token price, how much price variability there is. I mean, I think all this stuff, I don't even mess with that. I'm not smart enough to predict the exact crypto market cycles. I wish I was. What I would kind of point you to is more these scenarios and taking a look at what that means for emissions, so the overall DAG supply, and what that means for kind of the percent of the emissions that delegators capture. So the first thing I would point out is these charts after you kind of select. Oh, one more thing, sorry. You can play around with what percent of overall DAG is actually being delegated, right? So that's important because if you're delegating and only 30% hypothetically of DAG is actually delegating, your rewards are going to be a lot bigger individually because there's less people sharing that pie, right? And then these next two things start to get really interesting, and this becomes tricky. But what you see here in the input custom array, this is assuming how many metagraphs there will be. So now why do you see 5, 5, 5, 5? Well, because the way this model works is it goes by quarters. So what this is effectively assuming is the first year of Metanomics, you have 5 total metagraphs. The second year of Metanomics, you have 10 total metagraphs. And so it's not increasing each quarter, which is probably how the real world works a little bit more, but it's increasing annually, right? So this is assuming, if you look at this, by 2028, you have 20 metagraphs. So I would say it's pretty conservative. It's kind of hard to tell these things But what you can do is you can come in here and tweak any of these numbers. I can say we're going to have 6 by then, and maybe smooth it out to say, 5, 6, 7, 9, right? And then that will actually impact the outputs here that you see, okay? I can also use just a growth rate of what's the growth rate in metagraphs, annual growth rate. So when you see 2 here, 1, the starting number, so you start with 5 again. How many metagraphs do you add a year? Do you add 2? Do you add 5? Do you add 10? And if you look, I click on it, it's going to have an impact on these charts, right? So if you start with 5 metagraphs, you're probably not going to grow 50 metagraphs year 2. But in 3 or 4 years, growing by 50 metagraphs is reasonable. If you're on a base of say 60 metagraphs, you might grow by 50 the next year. So I prefer, because of that, and selecting a constant growth rate, I would prefer a custom array where I can tweak it a little bit more. So you can play with how many metagraphs you assume. Again, each number represents a quarter. So this is Q1 25, Q2, Q3, Q4. Now we're into 2026. And anytime you change these numbers, it's going to change how many tokens are added through time, how much DAG is delegated through time, right? It's going to oscillate between these minimums and maximums. But you can see in any scenario, and I'll show you this in a second, the inflation rate is coming down, right? The most important thing to look at here is this real inflation rate. So in economics, real growth is like economic growth minus inflation. That's why you'll hear people quote real GDP all the time. That's if nominal GDP is 5% and inflation is 3%, then real GDP is 2%, 5 minus 3. Well, inflation, right, is however much the DAG supply is growing. Inflation with delegation, is adding delegation. So that's really kind of the nominal increase in the supply of DAG. But then really important is this real inflation number, which is the nominal supply of DAG. So DAG inflation plus delegator inflation minus snapshot burn, right? And so depending upon what you assume, you're going to get from a growth rate that's going to start high by design, moderate over time. So if you look at the 2 blue lines here, right? This has nothing to do with snapshots. You can see the inflation is moderating down to that 3% level. And why does it moderate to 3 and stay there? Well, because delegators get 3% no matter what. And the rest of the inflationary model moderates through time on its way to, it's not 0, I think it's 0.5%. So what you can see is delegator, if you can kind of think about this chart, and I'll show you in different ways, as inflation comes down, the piece of the inflationary pie that delegators get continues to increase, right? And now think about snapshots. The overall supply of DAG is increasing each year by a positive number, but as snapshots grow, your overall supply is actually going to be declining. And this can most easily be seen here in the top chart. Supply billions of DAG. So this is your total supply of DAG. These charts are all dynamic based on these inputs, and they all update as soon as you hit enter. So for example, the quarterly burn rate, the number of tokens spent by the network and reduced from supply. I'm not really sure what that's going to be. I'm not smart enough to forecast with certainty how many snapshots a metagraph is going to be using. As we kind of pointed out with Panasonic, maybe their metagraph initially is big in comparison to Door in terms of snapshots, but that could be multiples of itself in a few quarters or a few years later. So this is a really kind of hard number to understand. And through time, as we see more examples of metagraphs and have more of an information set to work with, you can probably get a little bit more conviction in this number. But if I, just to show you this is all dynamic and live, look at your total DAG supply. It's going up, it's stretching, right? so that we have the funds we need to pay rewards to delegators, to entice and incentivize projects to build on the hypergraph. But then as snapshots rise up, it flattens out, and then supply starts coming down. And when I was talking about your stake of the network before, the entire time the total supply is growing as a delegator, your stake in the network is growing. And then if the supply starts to come back down, your stake in the network is growing even faster, right? So the denominator, right, of DAG that is splitting the value of the network is going to start decreasing, which all else equal means DAG tokens are worth more, right? And at the same time, the tokens are worth more, and your supply is actually, your piece of that pie is growing, right? But so as you can see, this is just illustrative, but if we're way off here on snapshots, we're way too conservative, and what that means for DAG being used and reducing supply, holy crap, what just happened? Well, DAG supply goes to zero. That's obviously not going to happen. What would they do in this scenario where snapshots just explode? Well, they're probably going to increase rewards to delegators, to validators. And so the real supply would maybe only go down a little bit, but your piece of the pie would expand even faster, right? So that's the thing to understand. And so maybe that was too extreme of an example. So instead of taking it to, 1.5 million, let's take it to, 250,000. And what you see is as snapshots grow, the supply peaks sooner and starts to actually go back. And in this example of just, we're increasing the amount of DAG, used and leaving the ecosystem from snapshots by roughly 2/3 or 67%, you can see that you're actually, through time, way under where the previous total supply was. And that's the beauty of this model, is as the ecosystem flourishes, everyone benefits. So I think it's really important for people to play with this themselves, to kind of look at it, to understand, what does it mean if snapshots are higher? What does it mean if we have more metagraphs, right? Faster than people think. What if it's less than people think? What if, people don't quite get the delegation and the max delegation is only like 40%? Well, your DAG emissions actually go down because there's a fixed 3% inflation that just goes to delegators. So if less people are delegating, that means that the incremental supply is actually less. But for those people that are delegating, if the incremental supply is growing by less, but anyone who's delegating is still getting that 3% plus, your slice of the pie is growing faster, right? That's what's important to understand. So you can see if I increase this number, let's just make it 90 to make it really obvious to people. The more people that delegate, the more the supply will grow because they get that fixed 3% plus a proportion of inflation. Okay, so you can see it's a little more choppy because it's oscillating between 35 and 90. Maybe a better illustration is changing that cap. And so you can see the new tokens that are added over time is not really eroding. And this is the beauty for people to understand. Even though the tokens added are not going down, right? Because so much is going to the delegators, the supply still is going to start coming down. That's the beauty of the model. And then if you say to yourself, well, this is too conservative, even with 90% of people delegating all the time, the supply peaks and comes down. So everything is kind of predicated on the network being used, which is exactly what you want. Interests are aligned between Constellation and holders. And maybe another thing to kind of point out, I know I'm jumping through a lot of stuff here. This is recorded. Everybody knows, I'm available on Twitter. I'm available on Telegram. Put an @ to me in one of the rooms. I prefer not to get 100,000 DMs, but I'm pretty active. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. What I would point out here, and this is kind of one of the most important concepts, I gotta find the right chart to kind of understand, okay? Look at this. This is the emission split over time. So what this is really representing is, of that DAG that's being added to the network, new tokens added over time, how much is going to delegators? Well, delegators here are getting more than half, and it grows through time as other inflationary components come down. So delegators start winning, which means if you delegate day one and you don't sell your DAG, your share of the network is going to increase faster than the overall inflationary rate, which means your piece of the network pie grows. And as through time, no matter what I do with any of these variables, because of the natural rate of decay in the kind of emissions going from 6% to 0.5%, delegators are going to actually gain a bigger piece of that pie through time. And that doesn't change as supply peaks. And that's the key to understand, right? Supply is expanding to fund aggressive growth of the network. It will peak, and no one can tell you with certainty exactly when that is unless they have a crystal ball. But the plan is to then have this slow retrenchment in DAG supply. And then maybe there will be debates sometime in the future of, do we need to actually increase inflation to just keep DAG flat? And that means more rewards for everyone who participates in the network, right? Now, one thing we're doing here, I want to make it very clear. This tool is not about trying to predict what the value of one DAG token is worth. It's trying to show you how the supply evolves through time based on network activity. This token price is to just somehow try to incorporate the crypto market cycles, right? But you have full ability, like I can say DAG is going to top out at 10% or $10. If I do that, what's going to happen is the inflation is actually going to come down. Because if you think about it, why is that? Why does price have any impact on the inflation? Well, it does, because ultimately in the real world, you have costs. So if the token price goes down, you still have to pay people. You still have to pay marketers. You still have to put out grants to Metagraphs, and they have to, hire people with real dollars, right? And so if the token goes down, you still want to have the same amount of firepower to incentivize network growth. But if the token's going up in value, your inherent DAG you already hold as Constellation or Stardust or whoever is worth more. So why inflate the network more than you have to? You don't, right? So as you can see, if I put the max price at 10, the inflation is going to come down faster, and so this slope is getting more steep. That real kind of inflationary rate will actually go negative faster. Okay, but we're not here to talk about and speculate DAG price using this model. It's for you to play around and understand how the different components work in the metanomics. And in any scenario, if the DAG token never goes up, hypothetically, delegators still get the lion's share of emissions, right? This is not a realistic scenario, the same way that me putting $1,000 here is probably not a realistic scenario, in the next few years. I can't predict the future, maybe 2039, I don't know. But I would urge you to kind of maybe be more conservative with your numbers and play around and just say, how does this impact the supply? And how does this impact my share of the rewards? And what you will see is, if you delegate your tokens, whether you own 10,000 DAG or 100 million DAG, your share of the pie will grow. And one more thing I want to point out to you, this is brilliant by the creator of this, is you can download any of these tables, which are dynamic, just like the charts, and you can download it into Excel. So you can pull out the numbers, create your own charts, okay? You can see here, I personally like this one. you can see the emissions. So 2025, we start with no emissions. The protocol emissions, the foundation emissions, right? Validator emissions. So the validators get that fixed 3% plus a variable portion of the overall emissions. So they win both ways. So even as the overall emissions drop, the delegator's fixed portion is permanent at 3%. And so you can see the fixed delegator emissions. So you could, in theory, like run the math of, if I own, 1% of all delegators, I'm going to get 1% of this number, right? So that's kind of how you can do it. And you can hit this button. It does a CSV. I have a Mac. It works on Mac, and it works on PC. And you can play with the numbers yourself. So
Yeah, and
I just threw a lot at people. I threw a lot of questions, Dagnum, or revisiting something. But I encourage people to replay
there's a question
this
here about the percentage. Yeah, so this guy is asking if it's 3% a year, a day, and no. So the inflation adjustment moves with the price.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I tried to explain that mechanism. And let me be clear on this. And maybe I can. And so what you see here, right? And this is what I mean by the decay in the inflation. The inflationary rate is coming down through time, right? So this is like 2027.75 is Q3 2027, then you're in 2028, right? So what you're seeing is there's two components to the inflationary rate for the overall supply of DAG. There is a variable rate, which as you can see decays through time, right? And eventually it's going to, get towards about 0.5% based on the model. But importantly, this goes down. On top of this number, there is a fixed 3% for delegators that never decays, right? And so when we look at, I think it's actually easier to see here, the delegators get a portion of that variable rate that comes down, right? Where is it? So look, and this actually probably illustrates it even better. Here's the inflationary rate. On top of that, delegators are getting some. So why isn't it 3? Why is it only 2.6? Well, in this first model, if it's 2.6, it's really telling you the percentage of people delegating, right? If 100% of all DAG tokens were delegating, it would increase by 3%. But because that will never happen, because we have DAG locked in metagraphs, right? You need your 3 DAG validators to be able to run a metagraph. You have some people that maybe aren't aware and don't participate. You have, Stargazer funds, you have Constellation funds that potentially aren't all being delegated or are not being delegated. But what you'll see is as long as that participation rate, right, which we talked about here in DAG delegation, if this was just constant, let's just put it at 90 all the time. Okay.
Yeah, so, and I think it's also important for people to realize that the current inflation rate, like right now, is around 4%.
That's exactly right. And obviously there were halvings to that. So in theory, it would decrease. But the jump, we're basically jumping year one from 4 to 8.7, right? So that's the 6% here plus 90% times 3 is 2.7. So that's how you're getting 8.7, right? And then this decays, but because I set it to always be 90% for this illustration, you can see this goes to 510, but we're still adding 2.7 to get to 7.8. This now goes down to 3.4, but we're still adding 2.7 to get to 6.1. So this will never drop below 3, right? And so as this comes down, right, the delegators get more and more of the overall emissions, meaning their pie, their slice of the pie grows at a larger and larger rate relative to the overall supply. And because this never stops growing, even when your DAG supply maxes out because snapshot fees are canceling out the inflation, right? And then at some point overcoming it, you're still getting those emissions. So your slice of the pie is now growing, even though the overall pie is shrinking. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me know if I didn't answer your question.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. And so the delegator, to answer this guy's question, yeah, I don't know how they're going to dish out the delegator rewards, if it's going to be daily or monthly. For instance, like the door metagraph, the DTMs, you get rewarded every single day for the DTM. It just goes right into your wallet every single day. A validator, like a network validator, is different. You get rewards with every single transaction. You know, it's a little amount, but if you look at your wallet, you can see that, you know, a little bit of DAG is being added to it. You know, every single snapshot. You know, it's not going to that won't show up in your Stargazer wallet, like where you'll see like a whole list of, you know, this was deposited, this was deposited, this was deposited. So I don't have an answer to that question. I would assume that, you know, it would probably be rewarded, you know, daily, probably, most likely. I don't see it being too different than how it's set up with the DTMs.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I want to touch on something that I think got brought up that, you know, I don't think people understand why this is the case, and I'm happy to kind of articulate my view on it. But first, I just want to tell people, again, this is not about what the value of the network is through time. This token price over time is more a mechanism to show market cycles in crypto and how they impact DAG emissions. See these bumps? These bumps here, okay, look at 2029, inflation shoots up, right? Why? Because the price is going down. Inflation's actually going down faster as DAG price rises, right? So this is just showing you how the emission schedule or emission rate is flexible based on market conditions, because again, it's about using money to incentivize metagraphs, right? And so if your DAG is worth more, you don't necessarily need as much to accomplish the same amount. But if your DAG drops, hypothetically, you know, 80% or 90% like we see in crypto cycles historically, you know, the inflationary rate is going to spike up to help dull that loss of value, so you still have a compelling budget to continue to attract new projects, right, to the ecosystem. So one, I want to stress this. This is not about trying to predict where the price of the token will be over time. It's to illustrate how market volatility affects the emissions rate. The other point I wanted to add, and this really isn't going to be anywhere on this kind of this modeling tool, is people had questions on the 30-day lockup period, like, oh, if I delegate and I want to pull my funds from one metagraph to another, why is there like a 30-day bonding period, I think is what it's typically called in other ecosystems. Well, imagine, like, let's go back to the Panasonic example. Imagine you're running a business and you're trying to understand your costs, right? Because you have the ability to scrape that 5 to 10% of all the delegator rewards on your metagraph. If that's going to somehow change dramatically, if it changed overnight, up and down, it might become somewhat difficult for you to kind of budget and think about, you know, what are my actual costs going to be for the quarter or for the following month or what have you. You can delegate right away and those rewards increase right away because having more money in your pocket isn't a big problem. But by giving them that window of a 30-day bonding period, you effectively give them enough time to adjust to the reality and kind of, okay, we see more and more people are leaving, so we can kind of extrapolate that. Instead of having 50 million DAG on our metagraph or my validator node, you know, in a month, it looks like we're probably going to be more around 30 million. there's a new hot metagraph that just came out, and it seems like a lot of people are allocating there. So it's just a mechanism to create, you know, a slowdown of the loss of, let's say, DAG delegation rewards for that validator so that they can budget more, right? Like maybe you're an individual validator who's doing, I don't know, like a 100,000 DAG, or let's say, 100,000 DAG lottery every quarter because so many people are delegating on your validator node that you want to pay back your community to kind of keep them there, right? Because you're doing very well. Well, if half the people leave for that hot new metagraph and they want to go on one of those metagraph validators, even though you're awesome with the community, that kind of gives you the window to say, okay, I see what's going on. I have time to adjust. Hey guys, we're going to switch the lottery that's every quarter for one random delegator on my validator node to, you know, 30,000 DAG now, hypothetically. So that's an example of how it might impact a business or an individual, right, who's trying to think about how to best incentivize those delegators.
All right, and then to answer a question in the chat here about the, like, what is the purpose of DAG? So again, the who can I share?
Do you want me to stop sharing?
No, don't.
Oh.
No, I can just switch between the two. Like I can change it.
Okay.
Yeah. So DAG is for bandwidth. And so this fee calculator that came out last year with this formula, the more staked DAG actually lowers the computational cost. So for validators, DAG is the collateral that's required to run a node. That's all it is.
And it's effectively the gas fee, right, for snapshots. Yeah. Right. So it's both. And maybe this is a good time for me to kind of talk just a little bit about a tokenomic concept, which I think is really important. And I don't want to necessarily talk bad about another project, but I'm going to use another project as an example because it's very easy. Okay. So one of the things that's really important in tokenomics is if you kind of think about a fixed set of demand for the DAG token out there. Obviously, this whole model and this new Metanomics is about increasing the demand for DAG, whether it's to, you know, stake it on your metagraph or to effectively pay for snapshots, right? If you're paying dollars, it gets converted and so on and so forth. To pay for snapshots to use the network, right? But what's important in tokenomics is two things. It's, you know, how much of the supply is available, and then what is the velocity of that supply? So let's talk about those two components, right? If you assume you're trying to attract demand, so we'll just say hypothetically demand is, you know, 100,000 DAG a day of demand, right? It's recurring buying to pay for snapshots. This is sometime in the future. We have a lot of metagraphs. So now let's talk about these two components. If you have a bunch of DAG locked in metagraphs, right, to effectively lower cost for them, that is available DAG taken out of the supply. So now that demand of 100,000 DAG a day, instead of it being, let's say it's sometime in the future, instead of it being, you know, 3.6 billion DAG, let's say it's 4 billion DAG, only maybe, you know, 2 billion DAG is available to even be purchased at any time because delegators have it locked up, earning rewards, and metagraphs have it locked up to lower their fees. So that act of taking supply out of the marketplace, it allows that 100,000 DAG a day of natural demand in the ecosystem to have a larger impact on token price. Because if you think about demand and supply, here's demand. And if supply is here, the intersection is price, right? But by staking DAG and taking DAG out of circulation, you're shifting supply to the right with that same level of demand. Now that cross is higher, right? Demand, supply, the intersection is price. So by taking supply to the right, price goes up, all else equal. The other important component is that velocity I was talking about. And I'm not trying to talk bad about the project, but if you think about XRP, right? Really interesting solution to solve a problem that is, pretty antiquated the way payments work. We know that's what a lot of crypto networks are going after, right? Or certainly the older kind of crypto networks, a lot of them were, copies of each other and all trying to do payments. But the important thing to understand here is if you're bank A and bank B and you want to convert Japanese yen to US dollars and you decide to use Ripple to do it, let's say you need, the equivalent of $10 million of XRP. Well, you immediately convert through XRP from one currency to the other. And now that XRP is immediately available to be used again. So because the XRP network is efficient and fast, nearly instant, you can keep using the available supply quickly over and over again. In a contrasting way, Constellation, somebody pays those snapshots, the DAG is burned, or the DAG is spent, so to say, right? From the snapshot fees, and then all the available DAG is being spread over to delegators, right? To validators. And so it's not necessarily immediately available back in the circulating supply. People have to sell those rewards for it to make it back to exchanges or any other method that people are going to use to buy DAG, right? To pay for snapshot fees or pay dollars, which then has to be converted to DAG used for snapshot fees. So that mechanism, it's a lot slower than being instantly available. That's the velocity is slower. So less available supply, slower velocity. What they do is they have it allows the equivalent level of demand to have a more outsized impact on price. So when you think about any tokenomic model you see objectively, what you would like to see is high levels of supply being locked up so there's less available circulation, and then the velocity of how quickly that token can be reused, slower is better. And the metanomics accomplish both of those things in spades.
All right. Oop. Lost audio. I'm going to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. I was having with my audio. It just
Yeah.
I don't know what got recorded or if you could hear me when I was speaking.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what. Well, this might be a good time to close it out anyway. I mean, I don't know what I heard or what of that was lost, but so I guess I'll run down it again. But so everything that you were just pointing out in the last couple of minutes is actually broken down on Hacken's review. And again, this is like a leading industry company that reviews stuff. And this was an independent party, and they came to essentially the exact same conclusions that you pointed out with your modeling. And this is what they said. You know, the simulations with varying rates of variability and price oscillations, it's evident that the newly introduced economic framework for Constellation is both resilient and robust. The model successfully demonstrates that inflation decreases over time while the supply of tokens gradually stabilizes. So, you know, this, if you wanted to build the perfect modeling for both large-scale enterprises and small to medium-sized businesses, this is what you would do. And this is exactly why they introduced this model.
Yeah, that's right. And really what it's all about is creating a situation where you have more capital and more resources to grow the ecosystem as fast as you can by attracting, you know, the best projects, by attracting the enterprises. And then, you know, people are like, oh, you know, unless it's a fixed supply, like, I don't care, like, it's not Bitcoin. That's why Bitcoin's so successful. Yeah, well, is Bitcoin deflationary? No, it will never be deflationary. And what we're showing you here is that if this model is successful, DAG becomes deflationary, right? And so that's the beauty of this model, is we say that it flexes because it kind of flexes up supply through inflation to increase the firepower we have to grow the ecosystem. And as that's successful, more and more DAG is consumed by snapshot fees and removed from the overall supply to a point where it eclipses inflation, and you actually end up with a deflationary asset. Deflationary supply, growing demand is the ideal outcome for value accrual and asset appreciation. I think you're still on mute, Dagram.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered it all, and I think we answered everybody's questions. But yeah, I mean, feel free to reply to this stream. Leave a comment in YouTube, and join Telegram or Discord if you had any other questions about the new Metanomics. But I mean, I think this is going to be great for the ecosystem. And, you know, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, all you have to do is just look at what's coming. I think the biggest signal here is, you know, Panasonic likes what Constellation is doing. So you should probably put more value into that than some random person on the internet leaving comments.
Yeah, and listen, I encourage everyone to, you know, use the modeling tool, read the documents, ask questions if you don't quite get something. Make up your mind for yourself, right? Like, there's a lot of resources in this community to be able to help. And I love answering questions by like pointing to documentation or providing clear facts, right? I don't want to give you my opinion. I say I like these metanomics. I do. I can kind of walk you through why I do. And we try to do that today. But ultimately, don't take my word for it. Don't take Dagram's word for it. Don't take Constellation's word for it. Look at the modeling yourself. Play around with the tool. Make sure you understand the concepts, and, you know, make your own decisions. That's all we can ask for. I think the methodology, the approach, and the high potential for positive outcome speak for themselves.
There you go. Do your own research. All right, everybody. Take it easy. Hope
Bye,
you
guys.
enjoyed
Thanks.
it.